Welcome to Cat Unmuted. I have Journey here. We met at a really weird place online, actually. We were participants of something called the Next Top Speaker, which was an interesting experience to say the least. Neither of us won, but that's okay. The experience was pretty great. I loved it. So Journey, tell me about who you are today. What drives you? What do you do? What's your passion? All of it.
So, who I am today, I would say someone that's kind of obsessed with like self elevation and self discovery. I started learning about feminine energy about 2, 3 years ago, and I really
Okay.
discovered a different part of myself, a part of myself that I didn't know existed, and a version of the world that I didn't know existed either. So,
Interesting.
yeah, I dove into
Yeah.
inner work and then I thought, oh, I should teach this so that, you know, every woman has access to this. So that's kind
Right.
of a little bit about me. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That sounds amazing. Sounds like you've gone through a lot of shit, so to speak, to get to where you're at now, because we all have to go through something to find ourselves in a place like what you just described, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Definitely.
so with that said, I think naturally the next uh question would be how many rock bottoms have you gone through in your lifetime? And rock bottoms, it doesn't have to be like financial rock bottoms, but like in my case, I had three total, and it was a lot of a combination of emotional, mental, and financial rock bottoms. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Honestly, I don't even have a number.
Oh
Um,
yeah, you
there's
went to
been
too
yeah,
many.
there's been a few, but yeah, I don't even have a number. And it's crazy
Okay.
because I feel like once you hit a rock bottom, it has this effect where you launch back up. I talk about like your
Agreed.
default vibration a lot, and you
Hmm.
raise your default. And I feel the higher your default is, the quicker you launch back up once you hit a bottom, you know?
Okay, that's an interesting perspective, and I like that. I do like that perspective. So out of all of them, what was the hardest one? And what did you like have to go through? What was the difficulty? And looking back on it, like, what do you think it taught you to bring you up to who you are today?
Hmm. I think it will take some thinking on my end because I have this thing where if I go through something like very heavy or traumatic, I kind of like forget about it. I have to like go deep into my mind to pull it back out. I feel like it might be a trauma response or something.
Right. No, I do know that feeling. Yeah.
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 Like it's not even coming to mind right now, but I do remember having feelings like, okay, I'm just done. I'm done.
Right.
I just want to be done with everything. I can't do this anymore. And just feeling, completely defeated and like there's nowhere to
Right.
go and like losing complete sense of myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So what, let's say, if you can remember anything of it, like beliefs back then compared to, well, beliefs back then that kind of held you back,
Mhm.
that you no longer believe today, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Thinking that it's all over. Like
Okay.
back then when I would get into a rock bottom or, just like a very dark space, I just felt kind of like I was drowning and there's no way out. Versus now, I know that, okay, this is just a moment. Like the world is so expansive and abundant and infinite. Like this
Right.
is not the only thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I know
Okay.
naturally, like, yeah, I'm not going to be stuck here. There's other
Right. I think
here.
there's a level of like, let's say, because in my case, the it made me think about some of the experiences I had where I was like, not just in a like with the dark place, right? You have these thoughts like there's no way out of this, and there's like no
Mhm.
hope, right? And obviously today I don't believe that anymore. Like I know there's hope. I know there is all these things that I can do to get myself out of a situation. And the last situation I was in, I had a miscarriage in 2024 at the age of 43, and I never thought I would have kids. And so for a moment, I had this like uh hope that like, well, things do happen, right? Not that I like I could have gone either way, but with or without kids. But when I had it, I was like, holy shit, it's happening. And 1 month later, it got taken away from me.
Mm.
And it didn't just, life didn't only just take the baby away from me, but like my body wasn't understanding that it was past. So I had something called a miscarriage where I held on, my body physically held on to the body. Like it was not flushed out.
Mm.
So I walked around feeling like a coffin, a walking coffin. That was the only way I was able to describe how I felt at the time. And like that's really dark, you know, it's like when is this
Yeah.
shit gonna stop happening to me, right? Um, but the more I talked about it, the more like there's something great about sharing your own story because then you have other people telling them. They'll be like, "Oh yeah, I went through that too." It's like I've known you for years and you never told me you had a miscarriage. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? Like, and come to find out, some of my friends actually went through a miscarriage while they were friends with me. I was like, why didn't I know about this? And they just literally kept it between them and their husband or partner or whatever. And in in all honesty, I felt a little what's the word? Like I wanted to have had the opportunity to support if I
Mm-hmm.
knew about it. And as a friend, I felt gypped. So it's so with that said, when I was sharing my story, I've had all these people come forth with their stories, and I'm like, I had this mental note. I was like, well, whenever I'm gonna go through shit, I'm gonna drag everybody along with me into the mud. Because that's how I wanted to be. Like I
Mm-hmm.
wanted my friend to drag me through the mud with them because I wanted that would be the way to support, right? So I did that, but the more I shared, the more I got all these stories and in a sense inspiration and uh in a whole different way hope. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
my point with that is um I feel like one of the things that I learned during that time is sharing your story really brings community together. And also, you learn because I've never gone through it, but when I shared it, people shared their stories of their miscarriage, and I learned something that I didn't know before. Not that it's their personal story that I learned about, but I learned about how other miscarriages could be. Does that make sense? So I'm learning because everybody goes through different things, even though it's the same scenario, right? Um, so going back to my point, sharing stories became a huge part of my life. And thus I wrote a book about my miscarriage because I want people who need to hear the story, whether because if they do choose to keep it within the family, um, ju- and not involve their friends or whatever, like they would at least have some sort of an outlet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like that's the belief before when I didn't share my stories, and now the belief that I have now is sharing my stories because I think it's important that people actually know at least a little bit of what a miscarriage could be and or whatever rock bottom because the book I wrote has a lot to do with the rock bottom itself, not just a miscarriage because I went through a financial crisis at the same time. So uh, that's the kind of I do today because of what I learned. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
Yeah. So, um, did you have a turning point like I did with that said? Like what you went through and what made you who you are today? Like little, just like what I described just now.
So for me, it wasn't like me going through a dark moment and being like, okay, I need
Right.
a change. It was kind of just, it was more in a moment of like things being okay, but me just reflecting on things in the past. So, from relationships and just a lot of dark things, even my upbringing, like coming up in a kind of a toxic household and just having, certain traumas as a child or, things like that. It all kind of built up. And I feel like what you experience kind of makes you. So it was I was a couple months into college. And
Okay.
yeah, I just had this moment where I was like, I feel so disconnected from my feminine energy. And the interesting thing is, I didn't really know much about feminine energy then. I might
Okay.
have watched like one video years ago on it, but I didn't really understand what it was. But I just had this feeling like I'm disconnected from it and I want to be connected to it. And
Right.
also, back then, I was broke and I was like, I want to be able to make money, lots of money, but not from like a masculine hustle way because I felt a lot of financial advice was very like just out of alignment for me, very hustle, masculine. So that's when I found a coach, a creator who talked about feminine energy. And she also talked about, making six figures a month while being in your
Okay.
feminine. And I thought, okay, this is perfect. So I went to look for that just to kind of, have that connection to myself. And I ended up doing so much inner work through it, which I did not expect. And I learned so much about myself. And I really got to face myself because when I started learning about, I guess personal development and manifestation, things like that, I was always afraid to do shadow work. It sounded so scary to me. But
It is.
yes, through this new lens, I was kind of just doing the thing and not really even processing that, okay, this is shadow work. And it became so easy for me. And I feel like the more you face yourself, the more authentic you're able to be.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I had I lived when I was uh in elementary school, or not elementary school. I would think I was already in middle school, but um how old was I? 14. At 14, I was visiting my dad. Okay, so I was born and raised in Japan, and I got sent to Denver for 1 year with my mom and my brother by my dad, who's American. Um, and he did that because he couldn't afford American schools anymore. So he was like, okay, you're gonna go with your grandma and you're gonna go to an American school where it's gonna be cheaper, you know. And when summer vacation came around, we got sent to Japan to see my dad for just the summer vacation. But long story short, from there though, my dad decided to keep us instead of giving us back to my mom. And so, in a sense, we're internationally kidnapped by my father, which
Yeah.
I didn't know until later. I thought this was an agreement between my mom and my dad, but apparently it was an agreement between my dad and my grandma, his mother, and
Mhm.
his mother happened to be a racist and didn't like my mother for being Taiwanese, right? So after she was like, stop being selfish and let your ex-husband have your kids for a little bit for once and blah blah blah. And now that we weren't there, she kicked my mother out of the house. That's a whole different story. But like my mom went through a whole shitload of like her shenanigans. But while we were living with my dad, he wasn't married to her yet then, but shortly afterwards, he married my stepmother, a Japanese woman who was like horribly narcissistic. And so we lived through, me, my brother, and my dad lived through mental and emotional abuse by her every day to the point where my dad became a hermit in his own room. And me and my brother, we shared a room in the living room because, Japanese homes are so fucking tiny, dude. Like there's you can't do anything. So anyway, me and my brother shared that the living room as our room. So because of that, our like private space is shared, right? Because it's the living room. So every day we had to face my stepmother while my father hid in his room or at the bar. Long story short, from there, I've had so much crap happen to me because of her, and also made me believe that I was worth nothing to anybody because I couldn't do anything right, right? So growing up into my adulthood, I still, to a point, believe that. And the only reason I'm telling you this is because I finally went and saw a psychologist, and oh my God, that was like the most interesting therapy session I have ever had in my entire life. I saw this guy, a psychologist, who did hypnotherapy, and the hypnotherapy he did on me, and I specifically asked for hypnotherapy because I wanted to remember some things that I thought I had forgotten. And all because I started writing my book about my childhood, which I'm still working on today. It is not published yet, but I couldn't. There was something missing in the book. I kept reading it back, and 5 pages in, I'm bored out of my mind. I was like, my book shouldn't be this boring. There's so much shit in it, you know? And so I went to see the psychologist, and he did this thing where made me imagine how many chairs there are in this like room. At first, it was like millions, and he like narrowed it down to chairs, 6 chairs. One of the chairs, the one that we visited first, I was at the age of 14, and that was when I moved into their house. And the way I imagined the 14-year-old me sitting in that chair, because he asked me to do that, I couldn't even see my own face, even though I knew what I looked like. I knew all these things, but me at 14 years old, I could only see myself like what my hair was over my face, and I was like basically like in a shell just sitting in the chair. So like obviously the me during that time looking at me at 14 years old, that's how I saw myself, was me hiding and protecting myself from all the shenanigans I was going through at the time, right? So after the therapy session, he told me to revisit this 14-year-old me in that chair, and all of a sudden I was able to see her face. Like I was more open. I don't That session opened up so much in me. I was like, holy shit. Like the fact that I saw myself as this depressing little thing. You know what I mean? I had no idea. That's when my shadow work started.
Wow.
I had no idea I was doing shadow work, but after that first session, I saw him several times, and then I like did all these things afterwards that turned out to be shadow work. Just me visiting all these times of my childhood especially during the time I was living with her. And it's powerful, but so fucking scary, like you said. But again, powerful, right? But that
Yeah.
has definitely changed my entire life since then. Hence the work I'm doing now as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I get what you're saying for sure. Uh I guess from there on, um like once the turning point change like you go through your turning point and things are starting to change, what kind of identity did you have to like leave behind into what you had to like you what kind of identity you found yourself being, if that makes any sense?
So the biggest thing for me was leaving behind the girl who didn't have boundaries. I grew up with a parent that had narcissistic traits. And so boundaries were never really a thing. And so I had no
Yeah.
sense of that. And I never even realized I didn't have boundaries until my first actual relationship. And I was like, wow, I need to be a woman with strong boundaries. So when I started doing inner work, that's one of the biggest identity shifts that I had. Um, what else? Really everything. I feel like I became a new person, honestly. Just the ways that, yeah,
Yeah,
just my
I
thought
agree.
processes, everything. I had to
Yeah.
let go. Like this, guess it's performing, feeling like I had to do things to make other people happy. For instance, like my parents, I started my first business when I was like 13, just to
Oh,
win, yeah, just to win their validation, I guess. So a
right.
big thing I had to let go of, a big identity I had to go let go of was seeking validation. I would always seek validation from my family members, my parents, my peers, everyone. So I really had to let go of that and really come into myself and see, okay, what do I need? What do I want to be? What are my desires, my dreams, things like that.
Okay. That makes me think about the day I left my first husband.
Wow.
Because so the life I lived in Japan came to an end in 2006. I was 26 years old, and I'm not going to get into like the details, but I ended up finding out that I was illegally living in Japan because of my dad's shenanigans with his wife that got him to, I guess, forget. And so we ended up, yeah, anyway, um, uh, so I had to surrender to the immigration office and buy a ticket and come back to the United States. I say come back, but that's how they see it, not me. Like Japan was my home. You know what I mean? So
Mm,
anyway, so I come here and I wandered around for an entire year looking for a job, and I couldn't find anything but a waitressing job, and I was horrible at waitressing. So and either way, I was like, waitressing is not the kind of job a 26-year-old should have in order to like start building a lifestyle, right?
yeah.
So I desperately joined the military, and I went into the Air Force. I was there for 6 years. And during that time, I met my ex-husband. And again, I had left everything in Japan, but I somehow like sneaked back into being controlled again. And I
Mm,
did not know I did that until I married him, because the day I married him, or not the day, but like shortly after I married him, all these things started coming out, like because he hid his true self to basically what's the word I'm looking for? Uh make me marry him. Basically, he did all the right things to make me believe that he's the right suitor for me, right? So
yeah.
we get married, and I find out that all these things were that he made me believe were not true. For example, I'm a spontaneous person, and he was spontaneous with me, and then we get married, and I keep telling him we need to do all these things, and one day he was like, I'm sorry I made you believe that I was spontaneous. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? He actually said those words and then
Um,
expected me to be okay with it and just relax on the couch with him with a movie, you know?
mm,
And that was like the way he every time it was my birthday, all he gave me was a fucking DVD or a what was it, a Blu-ray back then, movies that we could watch. I'm like, really, dude? Like, movies is your
great.
like, if it's just once or twice, it's fine. But every single time it was my birthday, or special days, it was always a movie. So anyway, my point is, my lifestyle with him like brought out all the insecurities and beliefs I had for myself, and the beliefs were born because of my stepmother, and I brought it all back to life by marrying this guy.
Yeah.
And I was married to him for 2 years before I was like, oh my God. I am so fucking miserable. I don't want to be here anymore. So I decided to put myself on a pedestal, like you said. And I'm like, I'm the most important thing in my
Mm,
entire life. What am I going to do about it? And as much as I hated thinking about it, because I thought one marriage is going to be it, the first guy I think is going to be the guy, right? So
mm,
I cried every day. And at first, I didn't understand why I cried. I cried at the time. I thought it was because I hated the idea of leaving my ex because I had a commitment. But what I was really crying for was the identity that I thought I would have had if the
mm,
marriage went the way it went in my head. Does that
mm.
make sense?
Yeah,
Like I
makes
am leaving the me that I thought, or the lifestyle that I thought should have been. And I am literally letting go of the hope for that to happen anymore. So I cried every day for that and grieving that the death of that hope.
mm-hmm.
And interestingly, when I signed the divorce papers, I felt so free. I just went and did everything that he never let me do and more. And that's when I met my current husband of almost 13 years now. So like a good came out of it clearly. You know what I mean? Once I
Yeah.
let all of that go and let myself uh giving me permission to basically hold me at a higher pedestal is when everything changed for me. So anyway, like what you were telling me, it made me think of that scenario in my case. And it was probably the best thing I've ever done for myself is letting go of that hope and creating new ones.
Mm,
And hence meeting the person that I actually felt comfortable and happy with, you know, and
yeah.
who not and the reason he gives me happiness is because I realized while I was dating him that he gave me space that I needed that I never had
Mm,
before that, which was freedom to do everything I want to do without his judgment. Yeah,
wow.
yeah. Yeah, so a little bit of shadow work happening there as well, right?
Definitely.
Um, oh yeah, it was probably the hardest thing I ever did for myself. That was like my first challenge that I took on unknowingly and did something about it.
Mm,
Um, but okay, so with that, I just talked about how I had to um, let go of hope and find new hope by putting myself on a pedestal. And therefore, during that time, I obviously had a lot of change in um, the way I communicated with myself. For example, who's more important in my life? And I had to answer that question with me and being comfortable with it and also giving myself permission to think that way. So with all the changes that you had to go through, what kind of self-communication did you notice yourself changing?
mm. Well, the first step in my inner work actually was to cut out any negative self-talk.
Yes,
Self-talk is like the one of the biggest things for your life. So I did that.
absolutely.
I don't even know why I did that. I was much younger. So I had already been kind of neutral with the way that I talked, with the way that I spoke. But I realized when I started getting, more into inner work and feminine energy and all those things, I would talk to myself with admiration. I would call myself an angel and talk about how beautiful I am and how magnetic I
I love
am.
it.
And just, yeah, really speak life into myself. So that's a big change that I noticed with the way that I speak to myself, where before
Yes,
I wasn't really bringing myself down, but I wasn't really building myself up either. So yeah,
yes.
that was a change, really speaking life into myself.
That's awesome. That's definitely a big part of what I do with myself as well. And um, my book talks about seeing the good, and you know what I mean? Not like the self-talk has a big impact on how you start seeing. things around you, and that's
Yes.
beautiful.
Yeah.
What has become like a non-negotiable whenever you do go through things? When, like, for example, if an old pattern popped up, like, what do you do?
One thing I do now, so when I first started and I had like an old pattern pop up, I would kind of force myself out of it or beat myself up. Like, why are you thinking these things? We work past it. What I do
Yeah,
now is I give myself grace and just let it pass. You know, your brain needs to process things. Sometimes you slip back into old
agreed.
patterns. So I just kind of observe it now and give myself that grace. And then once I've felt what I needed to feel or experienced what I needed to experience, then I kind of
Right,
transmute that.
right. Okay, okay. So it's kind of it's similar to what I do. So what I've learned throughout the year. So before I get into that, ever since I started doing this kind of work, I was a massage therapist at the time. I had a successful massage practice for 9 years before transitioning into full-time writing, right? Which is the me now. Um, but during the 9 years, obviously there was a whole like uh, 9 years full of stepping up into like success, right? And
Mm,
each step I take into success, I have like this new thing that I'm doing. So I'm expanding my business to make it bigger, right?
mm,
What I realized was every time I took that next step to whether it's bettering me or making the business bigger and better and more successful, um, my old fears pop back up. So what I have learned was that the fears will never go away. They're always going to be a part of you because that your nervous system has already created that fear, that
mm,
memory, and it triggers whenever you want to be better and bigger and more successful. So every time you take that step, those fears will pop back up because your nervous system is trying to like protect you from this success because you're not good enough and you need to basically see that it would be safer for you to not take that step, right?
mm,
So every time I did that, that fear would come back up. But what I also noticed is that I know this fear is popping up. I know it before it pops up because every single time it happens. Then I know what I need to do because I have gone through the process so many times, and I know exactly what I need to do to not let that affect me stepping up. And like understanding what is happening and then putting the process that you talked about into it, saying, you know what, that fear is no longer valid. I am not living in fear when I was with my stepmother. I am not living in fear in the presence of my ex-husband or whatever other fears that we have. In this case, this fear was let me rephrase that. There was one I was trying to imp- uh, look into employing employees. And the fear that popped up for the first time ever, I was like 5 years into the business, 6 years into the business, something like that. And I was starting to look at employees. And the fear that popped up was that when I was living with my dad and my stepmother, I had I I was 20, so in all reality, like I'm like adult enough to leave the house, but I was still going to high school at the time. I was very behind when it came to the academics. And so I considered myself still like valid and living at home. I didn't know I was illegal yet. And but because of my home situation, I decided to run away from home and I stayed away for 4 years. And during those 4 years, I had this humongous guilt that I left my brother behind for my stepmother to put her 100% focus on. with her narcissistic tendencies. So with that said, when I was hiring or thinking about hiring people, and I was making all these like papers to like hang in the massage school billboards to find employees to come in or potential employees to schedule a interview, there was so much fight in me. And I realized it was like the first time I ever had to deal with this particular fear. And I had to get my life coach that I worked with, who helped me declutter my emotions. That's what I called it anyway, decluttering my emotions. She helped me realize that my fear in hiring employees was if I couldn't take care of my brother, there's no way I could take care of employees. And I had no idea that was a fear. I thought it was just me not being good enough, but it had a whole entire different thing. So, with that said, it helps me to understand where the fears come from and be like, well, I'm 45 now. I'm not leaving my brother behind. He's happily married in Japan. Like, there's no reason. Like, he turned out great. You know what I mean? There's no reason for me to have this fear from childhood. So we talked about that immensely. And I was like, okay, I just need to uh, work on that and understand that that is no longer a fear and move on. So, like you said, the more I like experience that fear popping back up, because after that it popped back up often, just like everything else. And I would um, acknowledge the existence of the fear and watch it pass by, like you said. But in all honesty, for before, when I didn't know where these things came from, it was scarier to let it go. But understand where it comes from now, it helps me more. Um, but yeah, anyway, that's my little input on how I went through my stuff with what you said. But yeah. Um, so last question, kind of the last question. My tagline for my business, Beautifully Unhinged, is through courage comes bliss. And that's what I kind of chase, is the word bliss, as opposed to happiness or a lot of the other things that people actually like search for. I want bliss in the sense that like whatever comes to me, because you can be happy and then sad at the same time, or like there are conditions to that word, right? um but bliss, I feel like, is a word that describes that I can deal, if I can meet that, deal with whatever comes my way with grace.
Mhm.
So what is, in my case, bliss? What is that one word that you chase for your well-being?
Expansion. I feel like-
Expansion. I like
Yes,
it.
I feel like when I'm in a state of alignment, everything feels very expansive. I can have expansive ideas. I feel very open versus when I'm kind of in like going back to old patterns or letting my ego, like that voice in my head, tell me, oh, don't do this. It's not a good idea. You need to stay
Yeah.
safe. I feel very constricted. So for me, that bliss for me is when I feel expansive and open. I know, okay, this is where I need to be.
Okay. I like that. Expansive is a really good word for sure.
Yeah.
Is there anything about your business you would like to share?
Well, I am I am having a nervous system reset intensive on July 11th. Just
Okay.
basically, yeah, I feel the nervous system is the root for everything. It controls your actions, what you're able to hold, what you're able to receive, all those things. So
Agreed.
having a very regulated nervous system, a very grounded nervous system is the root for going where you want to in life. So rooted and regulated is basically going to be that reset so that you can get to your next 10x, you know? It's going to be
Okay.
Yeah, it's gonna be in person on July 11th in Kansas City, but I will record
Okay.
it, and so it'll be available online too.
That's awesome. I look forward to seeing that. That's interesting. And I do agree with you. Then, like, as a massage therapist, I talk about the nervous system all the time. All your actions, your emotions, your feeling and touch, not just your emotional feelings, everything's a chemical reaction in the brain.
Mm.
And so a nervous system reset is definitely super important. Um, do you have like a base social media that you use that people can follow if they wish?
I need to get one because I have this thing where I'm like, oh, I love this app right now. And then I get bored and then I go to the next one. I'm like, oh, I love it over here. So I was on TikTok. I know the best way is always through my website to keep up with me. But my
Okay,
TikTok is Beautifully Jaw. And then I have Facebook. I don't know what the user is, but you could probably find me Journey Pierre.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, if it's on your website, what is your website then so that people can look you up?
My website is theinnerbloom.org.
Innerbloom.org.
Yeah, the inner
Perfect.
bloom.
Is there anything you would like to share that we have may not have touched on today that you would like the listeners to hear about, possibly?
Honestly, when you were speaking, I noticed like certain parallels in our life, like what you said about your brother. I have three younger brothers. And
Mm,
so when I moved out to go to college, and I really started discovering myself, finding myself, doing inner work, and really experiencing, finding a part of myself that I didn't even know existed and experiencing the world in a certain way. I kind of had this guilt like I'm abandoning my brothers and I'm leaving them in that
yes.
environment. So
Hmm.
yeah, I really
Yeah.
felt you on that one.
I think there's a lot of like, I think everybody has like a level of guilt when if they have siblings, right? There's always a little something. Yeah, because I don't think my brother has one towards me. I think it's more of a uh what's the word? A blame, I guess. Like, how could she leave me? But as older siblings, are you the oldest?
I'm the oldest.
I think the oldest always has all the guilt in the world for their
Yeah,
siblings because we have to take care of them, right?
yeah.
My mom, she told me a story like when I was, how old was I? 11 or 12. And she was employed, I can't remember what job she was employed at, but her boss had an interest in English and had taken English lessons and all this stuff. And he's never like made friends with an English speaker. So
Mhm.
he actually approached my mom and was like, "Can I like maybe hire your daughter for maybe an hour a week so that I can just speak in English and basically keep up with the English that he has learned or learn more, you know?" And my mom was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll ask my daughter." And I was like, "Sure." Like it's something new, something different. You know what I mean? And he was
Yeah.
more than happy to pay me for it. So I was like, "Hell yeah." So I went and dude paid me $30 for that hour. I was like, "Oh my God, I'm rich." Like I was so excited about it. I know as an 11-year-old, $30 is a lot, right?
Yeah.
So, excuse me. So going home, apparently I showed up after this English lesson. I showed up back home without the $30, but I had bought groceries with them.
Mm,
Like, what that tells me is how much responsibility I already felt for my brother
yeah.
at the age of 11. I bought apples because it was his favorite fruit. I bought bread because that's what the family needed. And I can't remember what else, but those were like the two things my mom would like. I don't know how many times I've heard her repeat this little story, but I was like, she was like, I knew then that I didn't have to worry about my daughter. And I'm here sitting here thinking, really? That's what goes to like I kind of feel bad for myself now knowing that I had so much responsibility from the time my brother was born, you know.
Yeah.
But Yeah. But that's the realization I have today compared to what I believed back then. But yeah, yeah, that was a huge thing for me is letting my brother go. That's a whole different podcast I can probably do on my own and share. I did a lot of work on that.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you for showing up on my podcast today. It was wonderful having you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
Right? And
Yeah.
it's kind of nice to actually finally talk in person as opposed to, well, not in person, but virtually, but you know what I mean.
Thanks. Thanks.
Because I've been looking forward to this.
So,
So,
yeah, I was telling my partner about it, and she was like, "Isn't she the lady from like, all the way back in January? Like, weren't you talking about this a long time ago?" I was like, "Yeah, it's finally time."
oh, that's awesome. The fact that you already talked about it with your friends is awesome. Now it's coming a reality.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, you have a wonderful day. I believe after the recording, it'll just like shut off. So, we'll continue to keep in contact through our messaging.
Okay, you too. Have a great
All
day.
right.
All
You
right.
too. Bye.